What are you scared of? Lots of people fear death, some fear disaster, but I can think of one thing that makes me feel absolutely terrified, more than anything else in this world. Yep, this video is about grapplers, and much like the video I did on charge characters, I think the best way to do this is to start off with the one character who is synonymous with the grappler archetype. Weighing in at 400 pounds and standing 7 feet tall, I don't think there's a wrestler alive who's in his same class, which is probably why he moved on to fighting sumo wrestlers, boxers, and whatever the hell Blanca is. Zangief, the Red Cyclone. Just like with Guile and Charge characters, Zangief is pretty much the archetypal grappler, debuting all the way back in 1991 with Street Fighter II, which, as we all know, is the first game in the series. Since then, he's become iconic as the poster boy for grapplers. However, saying that raises a question I'd like to address before we go any further. What actually is a grappler? Compared to other FG archetypes, it's kind of a vague name. I mean, rushdown characters rush you down, zoners zone you out with projectiles or other long-ranged forms of attack. Grapplers grapple you? So is any character who can throw a grappler? Obviously not. Is it just any character with a command grab? Now, that would mean every character in Vampire Savior is a grappler, as is JP, and if you've played Street Fighter VI, you know that's not right. With movesets for characters in fighting games, a command grab is just a natural thing to add in there for extra spice, so there's a clear distinction between a character whose game plan revolves around command grabs and a character who just happens to possess one. It's obviously subjective, since there's no grand authority of fighting game term definitions, and I personally have my own definition, but I decided to ask about it on Twitter just to gauge other people's opinions. It was interesting reading through all the different responses, and some of them were pretty nuanced, so I want to thank everyone who took the time to actually respond. That said, there were some universal constants that most people agree define a grappler, beyond just having a command grab. The most important thing to me, which many of my favorite responses also highlighted, is that command grabs are not just a tool, but the tool, integral to the character's game plan and the focus of their strategy, and that command grab should be damn strong and hella rewarding to land, and Zangief has that in spades. Sure, there are other Street Fighter characters with command grabs that are important to their game plan, like E Honda, but for Zangief, the grabs are the game plan. If you look at Gief's special moves across most games, aside from the lariat and the occasional useless strike counter, most of Gief's tools are grabs or otherwise focused on getting him closer to land a grab, and the most important of these grabs, by far, is the SPD. That's spinning piledriver, Capcom. None of this screw piledriver nonsense. The SPD is every grappler player's wet dream and everyone else's worst fucking nightmare. While it tends to sport some differences from game to game, the SPD usually boasts fast startup, great range depending on the version, and most importantly, frightening damage. A combination of just a few hits or combos and SPDs can put you in danger of dying or being stunned in a small number of interactions, which means anytime you're on the ground, you're in danger. Typically, the light version of SPD has the most range and the least damage, heavy is the inverse, and medium is a happy middle ground between the two. The input for the SPD is the classic full circle motion, a little intimidating at first for sure. Much like with down charge moves, fudging a 360 input usually results in a jump, which can be very annoying, but it gets easier with time. Remember that in most games, the input reader isn't looking for a full 360, just the 4 cardinal directions, down, left, right, and up. The SPD is core to Gief's offense and pressure. Even when he's not planning to try and land it, the opponent's own fear that he'll potentially do it is something Gief can and must exploit in order to win games. Since most fighting games don't let you tech command throws like you can with normal throws, you have to perform a different defensive option to avoid the grab. Jumping is the most consistent answer, since it's a pretty low risk commitment and allows the defender to exploit the SPD's biggest weakness, which is the tremendous whiff recovery, a weakness you see present for command grabs in many fighting games. Since you're basically guaranteed a punish for doing it, jumping the SPD is a fairly reasonable response, but the desire to jump his command grab is something Geef can also use to his advantage, since his own strikes will hit the opponent out of jump startup. Stay on the ground to block strikes, and you're open to getting grabbed by the SPD. Try to take to the skies to avoid the SPD, and you're vulnerable to the strikes. Welcome to the grappler mix-up, something that every grappler wants to enforce. Of course, there are more layers to it than this simple outline. Across different games, there are different defensive options an opponent can commit to while dealing with a grappler's command grabs, such as invincible attacks like DPs and supers or backdashes. But if Geef makes the right read, well, their face will meet the pavement regardless. Taking advantage of normal grabs is important. They may not be as flashy as command grabs, but they can still be very strong for various reasons. For Geef, since his regular grab has far less recovery than the SPD, it's good to use in mix-ups. If the opponent jumps anticipating a command grab and Geef does a normal grab, he recovers fast enough to anti-air the jump, assuming they didn't jump back. At the end of the day though, Geef is one scary bastard when he's next to you. However, Geef isn't always going to be right in your face mixing you up. He's got to get in first, and in order to do that, he must leverage his large size. Putting that beefy body to use, Geef has incredible mid-range buttons he can use to play footsies and slowly make his way towards the opponent. While they may not seem terribly rewarding on hit since he can't always confirm his best pokes into combos, the screen real estate he can get off them is invaluable and allows him to move towards more favorable positions, mainly the corner. I'd like to highlight his standing heavy punch. In SF5 and SF6, this button can be charged, and it gains armor once it's charged up, allowing it to absorb hits and deal a punish in return. In SF6 anyway, since that's the game I'm more familiar with, this button is busted and allows him to circumvent many characters neutral by eating their pokes up and sending them fucking flying, although the armor only applies to the upper half of the body, so watch out for those. It's also vulnerable to drive impacts. This effective neutral only becomes even scarier when you consider that once Geef is in his effective proximity, you also have to worry about the longer ranged versions of his SPD being used in response to your own pokes. In terms of landing the SPD, you've got your options. Tick throws, which is when you do a grab after performing a strike with low block stun, resets in the middle of combos, punishes, you can do it in the middle of your opponent's block strings to interrupt fake pressure, or just say fuck it and pop it on wake up, and once it lands, the game starts all over again. This can all vary from game to game as certain specifics of Zangief's kit or how the SPD works in terms of Oki and damage might be different, not to mention game-specific tools like his amazing V-Trigger 1 in SF5 and Dry Rush in SF6, but the general idea is that Geef either kills you with grabs or kills you because he made you scared of taking his grabs. Good survivability is also something Geef flaunts, and again, a commonality amongst the grappler archetype. Believe it or not, Body of Iron is not just hyperbole. You'll often find Zangief chilling amongst the highest health brackets in every game. In USF4, Geef has 1100 health and 1100 stun, tied for the highest in the game. In SF5, he has 10,075 health, tied for the highest in the game, and 1100 stun, the highest in the game. And in SF6, he has 11,000 health, the highest in the game, putting him a good 1,000 health over the majority of the roster and 2,000 over Akuma. He shrugs off stray hits like they're nothing and keeps on trucking towards your sorry ass. Geef's strengths are very extreme, but so are his weaknesses. To make up for how devastatingly powerful he is once he gets in, Geef's main struggle in many matchups is, well, getting in. He's stricken with horrible mobility, which is another grappler staple, slow walk speed, bad dashes, and generally sluggish frame data. The biggest problem that comes from this is a slew of bad matchups against zoners and characters with projectiles in general, due to his terrible movement, large size, and just no way to fight from full screen. While different games have given him various ways to get around fireballs, usually at the cost of some resource like meter, projectiles generally remain his Achilles heel, forcing Geef to slowly walk people down until he gets a chance to make something happen, or force him to commit to a riskier option like a jump. Most of Geef's non-SPD specials are other grabs, such as the running bear grab. This has slower startup and can be jumped on reaction, but makes up for it by both moving forward and having pretty good corner carry, as well as armor sometimes. Might not seem worth using, but an opponent conditioned to stay on the ground may just not be ready to jump this baby. Among his other specials that aren't grabs, he has the iconic Lariats, which acts as an anti-fireball, an anti-air, and a combo ender, a versatile king. Any old head Gief players watching this might remember a move where Gief turns his hand green and lunges forward. This was meant to be the ideal anti-projectile, erasing fireballs and moving him towards his opponent, which made it a solid combo and Oki tool too. This move is called Banishing Flat, although most people usually refer to it as Green Hand. However, in SF5 and 6, this move is nowhere to be seen. Not sure why. It's not a common thing for Capcom to dumpster an iconic move like this 2 games in a row, and it would have been an ideal V-skill for him in 5 in my opinion. Oh well. I suppose they did give him something else to compensate. This is not Gief gearing up for a hug. This is a special move called Tundra Storm, and it's a strike counter. Okay, that's not bad, giving Gief another way of calling out pokes. Thing is, it only works on kicks. Kicks that hit his upper body, which means against, say, a low forward, this move won't work. This is such a weird idea for a move, and in a lot of matchups it's just not worth the risk of going for it, even with the admittedly decent damage. At most, it'll work on a handful of buttons in a character's kit, which means everything else would just hit Gief out of the counter. The saddest and funniest part is that in both SF5 and SF6, there exist characters that do not use any kick attacks at all, literally making it worthless in those matchups. Nice one. In Street Fighter 6, it can be used as a niche counter against certain kick-based drive reversals and drive impacts, but in situations where you can do that, you can also usually just punish with an SPD for better damage. And again, this option is only present in a handful of matchups. Zangief's defense is also another place where he struggles, and again, a fairly common grappler flaw. With no invincible DP to rely on when waking up, he's pretty limited on the ways he can get out of pressure, and unless he has that. Zangief's level 3 is one of the best supers in SF6 because it's a fully invincible command grab that is unjumpable after the flash. If your ass isn't in the air or in some other state of throw invincibility when he does this pose, you're getting scooped. When Gief is at critical art health, this baby does a whopping 53%, so you do not want to get hit by this shit. Otherwise, for the most part, Gief's defense, even with meter, is spotty, especially when taking into account his poor frame data and big hurt box. An important thing to mention is that post-SPD Okizeme can vary based on the game. Sometimes Gief is left very far away on hit, meaning he has to make his way back in after landing an SPD to begin his offense again, and in some games he's able to remain very close and can potentially threaten another meaty grab, allowing him to loop the mix-up. But whatever game he's in, there's one guarantee. Once Zangief is close to you, no one is safe. Of course, the opponent can jump to escape your grabs, but with the right conditioning, you can put the fear of God into them and keep them on the ground in pure fear, ready to be scooped. It's all about making the right reads and being patient enough to break down an opponent's defense, which is highly rewarding for the grappler, and utterly horrifying when you're on the receiving end. In the end, Gief is a scary motherfucker, no ifs, ands, or buts. So let's summarize what he's taught us. He has a game plan that revolves around a very powerful command grab, which he either wants to land or make the opponent so scared of it that they'll make a mistake he can punish. He's large and has big buttons with great range, high health that allows him to survive more interactions than most characters, and extremely strong mix-ups that make him terrifying once he's in your face. In return, he's very slow. His mobility is limited, which results in bad matchups against zoning-focused characters and a need for a patient playstyle most of the time. He also has poor defense due to lacking or expensive reversals and not the greatest frame data, and if the opponent makes the right read on him, he can be punished heavily due to the whiff recovery of his command grab. This is the basis of the big body grappler archetype in my eyes, and Zangief is maybe the purest example. Characters who are focused around command grabs but don't follow some of these design philosophies like being faster or having a more versatile set of tools and game plan do exist, and they're often referred to as hybrid or pseudo grapplers. For this video though, I thought it would be fun to look at some examples of grapplers from other fighting games. Obviously not every game is Street Fighter, but the concept of a big body who aims to use command grabs to win rounds has been used in games that are vastly different in terms of pace and design. Sometimes the end result is similar to Zangief, and sometimes there's a world of difference, and both of these things can be true as well. So, let's check out some grapplers. Potemkin. It's game over once you're in his grasp. Potemkin is the resident grappler of Guilty Gear, and in many ways he's like the series equivalent to Zangief. Big, slow, not that scary from afar, but once he gets in, that's where you invoke religion. He shares many of the same strengths and the same weaknesses, but put into the context of Guilty Gear. Since Gear tends to have a higher emphasis on mobility with double jumps and air dashes, Pot's bad mobility stands out quite a bit. He cannot air dash, he cannot forward dash, only back dash, and his walk speed is, bad. That is to say, Potemkin is a slow fella and struggles to get in conventionally, especially against zoners. However, he has a number of tools he can salvage to make closing the gap a little easier. First of all, Potemkin has high health thanks to a good defensive rating and high guts rating, guts being a modifier that decreases the damage you take when your health is low, so it can take a lot to put Potemkin down. As you'd expect, his normals are on the slower side, but also absolutely gigantic, giving him access to tons of amazing pokes he can use to control screen space and start his offense if he's farther away than command grab range. As far as actively moving across the screen, he gets major use out of Mega Fist and Hammer Fall. The former hops into the air and comes down with a huge hitbox, allowing it to leap over attacks that are low enough to the ground. He also has a backwards version, and this one usually has better frame advantage on block, allowing him to remain plus while making defensive retreats. Hammerfall, on the other hand, charges forward with armor, allowing him to blow through attacks. It's solid as a combo tool and it can be Roman cancelled to make it safer, but what really stands out is Hammerfall Break. Hitting P before the actual attack causes Potemkin to stop the charge, making for an extremely tricky mobility option that allows Potemkin to be very unpredictable, both when moving and on the offensive. Use it to move on in closer and or set up a throw, especially handy if you have the meter for a Roman cancel. Pot also has a few potent anti-zoning tools, such as FDB, which destroys projectiles and sends one back in return, and Slidehead. Slidehead sends out a full screen projectile across the ground. Depending on the game, it'll be unblockable or just hit low, but either way, if it does hit, it'll knock down, giving Pot an easy way to get in and start his game. And by game, I mean this. The Potemkin Buster is what makes Pot so scary. Like the SPD with Zangief, your game plan with Pot revolves around either trying to land it, or making the opponent scared enough of you landing it that they'll do something you can punish. With 3-frame startup in Plus R and Xrd Rev 2 and 5-frame startup in Strive, this baby is crazy fast, making it a good punish option and even a decent reversal in some situations. The damage it inflicts can change based on the opponent's health due to guts decreasing damage taken based on remaining health, but 3 or 4 busters is usually night-night for most characters, depending on the game, which makes the buster insanely scary. Pot Buster also has incredible range, capable of scooping from far distances. In Strive, Potemkin can use his 6K, which travels forward, to increase the Potemkin Buster's range, as well as the range of his other specials, even further by using a technique called Kara cancelling. Kara cancelling is when you cancel the startup of one move into another. In this case, cancelling Pot's forward-moving 6K transfers the momentum of the startup slide into the buster, allowing it to hit from really far away, like at round start distance. The Oki is also really nice, especially in the corner. Pot can even combo off of it with the right positioning or resources. While I have far less experience with Potemkin than I do Zangief, I can say that what matches I had played against Potemkin reaffirmed that he's still scary as shit. His damage, both off of busters and his combos, is huge, and even with the ability to air block if you do successfully jump away, he can still turn that into offensive pressure for himself, not to mention he has very strong anti-airs thanks to Heat Knuckle. Pot has a super called Gigantorkai, and not only can it be used as a reversal depending on the game, but it creates a large lingering projectile that gives him strong combo extensions and pressure, on top of absorbing other projectiles and doing huge stun in games where that's applicable. Potemkin's high health makes him a tough nut to crack, but he's also friggin' huge, so he's a big target too, meaning you gotta take more abuse than other characters due to his large frame. Like with Zangief, you fight uphill battles trying to get into your preferred range, especially if the character you're fighting has a strong set of projectiles, but once you get in, it's fun time. Potemkin's viability across games is an interesting topic of discussion. There are some games where he's good, some games where he's not good, some games where he's really terrible, and then we have Strive, the most recent GG game. In the current version of the game, he's considered top tier, and it's not hard to find people incensed over how strong he is. But the way this came to be is really interesting to me. In a patch released late last year, Potemkin had the ability to Kara cancel 6k into his specials removed, but they compensated by giving the Potbuster an increase in range, a single hit of armor that they also applied to Hammerfall Break, along with a ton of other buffs, including hitbox improvements on his normals and changes to his special moves' motions to make it so that there was no input overlap between them. They also heavily buffed FDB, his main anti-projectile move. Although he was buffed overall in this patch, the removal of his Kara cancels was an unpopular change that got quite a bit of pushback, especially coming so late in the game's lifespan and removing something that rewarded good execution. So a few months later, they restored the Kara canceling properties of 6k in another patch. Now, they did nerf the damage of Buster and some other moves to compensate, but these nerfs do not make up for the fact that Buster is still an insanely far-reaching command grab that still does a fuckload of damage, and most of the buffs he received, which were presumably designed with the idea of Potemkin not having the Kara cancels they gave back to him, were not touched at all. Needless to say, this armor makes the Potbuster even harder to deal with, as it'll absorb any single hits and scoop you up, complementing its throw invul and the insane damage. Oki and pressure for Pot are also top notch, as Strive Potemkin has access to Garuda Impact, a tremendously strong tool that's massively plus on block and guard crushes. Guard crushing is sort of like an alternate form of block stun that certain moves inflict, which has a few differences to normal block stun, chief among them being that unlike regular block stun, characters who are guard crushed gain no throw invul after recovering. The Kara removal patch also gave Garuda Impact projectile properties, and among the implications of this change, the big one is that if you use faultless defense to block this, Potemkin won't get pushed back, which made it even stronger than it was before. I think what really makes him so terrifying is that even though his mobility is bad by design, the movement capabilities and armor of Hammerfall and Slidehead give him such dominating screen presence, and this combined with his huge buttons lets him transition into his amazing offense in so many different situations and ranges. Thanks to Strive's wall break system, Pot also has access to tons and tons of meter. He's gonna naturally build more meter from taking hits since his health is so high, and Potemkin can easily take advantage of the wall system since Heat Knuckle always causes a wall break, and after causing a wall break, you're granted positive bonus where you gain extra meter and a lot of it, as well as extra burst and some other benefits. Pot's offense allows him to gain meter as easily as you and I take breaths, allowing him a constant stream of supers and Roman cancels to press his offense and force his mix. A lot of people have major issues with how this version of Potemkin is designed. He's just a giant armored menace with pretty oppressive offense and extremely strong use of the game's systems, and nothing to really offset that. Sure, he still has some matchups where he struggles due to his inherent weaknesses, but the general consensus seems to be that his strength up close more than makes up for this, especially when you take his own anti-zoning and movement into account. It's pretty insane. Maybe Potemkin deserves it considering his humble beginnings? Hey, I'll give Arxis credit. This guy and Season 2 Zangief have all but proven to me that buffing grapplers to be dominant is certainly a great way to create unity amongst the community. Unity built from fear and anger, but unity nonetheless. Since Undernight Inbirth 2 was my main game for most of last year, of course I gotta talk about Uni's main grappler. The hulking Waldstein fills the role as the big bad monstrosity with slow movement and a scary up-close presence, but also some fun twists on things, as Uni tends to do with its characters. To quickly cover the standard grappler conventions, Waldstein is extremely big and extremely slow. His walk speed is akin to walking through molasses, and he's one of the few characters that cannot run, instead having an incredibly sluggish step dash. However, unlike Potemkin, who was locked out of the ability to air dash, Waldstein still has access to Undernight's universal movement tool of Assault, which is both a short hop and an air dash, so he does have ways to close the gap. Wald also has the highest health in the game by far at 11,500. For comparison's sake, Enkidu has the second highest health and he's at 11,000. Attached to his huge arms are giant fucking claws. As you'd expect, these claws give him access to some of the longest reach in the game, with buttons that are generally very slow but have excellent range to compensate. For most Uni characters, their fastest normal is 5 frames startup, but Wald's fastest buttons all start up in 8 frames. Obviously, this isn't ideal, especially when Wald is getting pressured, but the incredible mid-range respect Waldstein demands with his large normals, specials like 214X, and the potential of a random jumpscare Assault JC cannot be denied, even if he does move like a snail. His pressure sequences consisting of many long-ranged buttons also means he can be very hard to abare against, especially for characters with stubby normals. Fast buttons will usually whiff because they're too short range to connect, while slower, longer ranged buttons will typically get counter hit. Waldstein's main command grab has 3 different versions, each with their own quirks. 360A is a fairly low damage command grab, all things considered. Waldstein has incredible combo damage, able to score 3.5k plus off of most routes, especially when he has resources, so a throw that does 2080 damage in comparison seems a little whack, especially when he doesn't really get mid-screen Oki after. However, it's worth mentioning first that all versions of Waldstein's 360 can be done with a 720 input. In exchange for the harder inputs, the grab will deal increased damage and leave Wald closer to the opponent. Second, 360A in particular is fast. It's 3 frame startup, faster than his normal grab. It may not seem terribly rewarding to land, but the damage adds up, and once you're scared enough to begin jumping or mashing against Wald on defense in anticipation of a command grab, his frame traps and staggers will catch you. He can make himself plus on block with the aforementioned 214X, his claps, allowing him to reset his pressure and keep you guessing. 360B on the other hand. Yeah, this shit got mad range. Wald can snag you from very far away with this baby, but there's a catch. If this connects raw, it's techable like a normal grab. Still, much like with running bear grab, a properly conditioned opponent stressing out over everything else Wald can throw at them may just not be ready to tech it. And if it hits as a punish or is used during a combo, it will be untechable, just like 360A. 360C is invincible. This is meant to be his main reversal. It costs 100 meter, which in Uni is half of an entire bar, but in return it delivers a solid defensive option that can get Wald out of a pinch and delivers some good damage all the same. Waldstein plays the standard grappler game plan very well. Having a 3-frame command grab is super strong, and he has tons of ways to land it, like cancelling it out of a dash, buffering it after a whiffed 6-6C, or during tick throw pressure. Again, it's not the most damaging option, but man, it still manages to be hella scary. He also has access to a charge command grab, sometimes referred to as God Press, and this thing can not only be routed into, but it basically gives him the corner for free, where he can enforce even scarier offense. However, in many ways, Wald sets himself apart from a lot of big body grapplers, especially the ones I've talked about thus far. The biggest reason is that he doesn't struggle nearly as much at long distances because he actually has some projectiles of his own. 22X will send a shockwave along the ground that destroys other projectiles, and he can throw a rock with his force function. This one is real nice because it's mega plus on block, so it can be used as a solid pressure reset. Wald also has access to a property on some of his normals that allows them to destroy projectiles. Zoning can still be a struggle for him. It's just the nature of being such a large and slow character, but he certainly has tools to deal with it most of the time. The ability for him to pressure at and play such a strong mid-range is why some people refer to Wald as a mix of mid-range zoner and grappler. He's super strong once he gets in, but scooping isn't always the focus of his game plan, especially in certain matchups. I kinda like this design, to be honest. His command grab is a little less fucking ridiculous in terms of damage, but he has other tools to circumvent the standard weaknesses that a big, slow character would suffer from, since his game plan isn't always focused on getting in and enforcing the strike throw. It's also important to note that part of why Wald's grappler game plan is strong plays into Undernight's system mechanics, and in particular, the grid system. To summarize it real quick, in every game of Uni, you're essentially playing a game of tug of war with that bar at the bottom. Almost every action you perform will gain or cost you grid, and once a cycle is complete, the player with more grid on their side of the bar will enter Vorpal state. Vorpal grants a whole smorgasbord of effects, many of which benefit Wald tremendously. Chain shift is a big one. This is kind of like a Roman cancel, allowing you to cancel an action on block or hit, as well as creating a time stop of sorts that lets you react to and punish certain things like gaps in strings much easier. Chain shift will also convert all the grid in your possession at the moment into meter. Wald can combo off of his command grabs with chain shift, circumventing the issue of low damage and poor mid-screen Oki, and he also really appreciates the extra meter. In addition, every character has a unique trait they gain while in Vorpal, and Wald's is a series of heavy buffs towards his force function. While Wald is in Vorpal, force function starts up faster, recovers faster, and wall bounces on hit normally. Without Vorpal, it only wall bounces if you increase it, which is basically when certain attacks can be charged by holding down the button to enhance their properties. Force functions cost grid whenever they're used though, so if you're trying to win the cycle, liberal use of this move is recommended before you've secured it. Shielding is another tremendously strong system Wald can make use of. You can shield in neutral, which is a blue shield, or while you're blocking, which is green shield. Shielding an attack will reduce the amount of time you spend in block stun by 3 frames, giving you better frame advantage and potentially allowing certain moves that are normally safe on block to be punished. Moves that are -5 are normally not punishable by Waldstein's fastest normals since they all have 8 frames startup. But if he shields a -5 move, it becomes -8, allowing for a punish with his 2A, 1A, and 5A. Both shields will also allow you to gain grid and push the opponent farther back than they would be if you blocked normally. Since Wald's slow normals makes it hard for him to fuzzy mash out of staggers, and his big body makes him more vulnerable to jump-ins and assault pressure, knowing how to shield is very important for his defense. His reversals are good, but they're either fairly slow and or cost meter, so don't ignore shielding just because you have access to strong reversals like 360C. In addition, if you take damage while shielding, you'll be grid broken, and being grid broken loses you access to shielding, assaults, and also basically guarantees that you lose the cycle since you cannot gain any grid during the grid break duration. One of the ways to get grid broken is being grabbed while you're shielding. Huh, how interesting. This is part of why Wald's strike throw is so frightening. If you make a bad read on his pressure and shield at the wrong time, you're just asking to get grid broken by a 360, and once that happens, the fun really starts as Wald basically gets free reign to bully you with claps, staggers, and scoops. Waldstein leans super heavy into using the systems. Maybe too heavy. He's not immune to anything I just mentioned. Shield is very important for his defense, and assaults are his main way of closing gaps. If he gets grid broken, well, it's a big struggle for him, so be smart on your defense. So yeah, Waldstein, you're pretty cool, even if Nanase vs Waldstein gives me stomach ulcers. For a deeper dive on this big fella, I'd recommend Frankentank's video on him. It's a good one. This is, I believe, the first time I've ever talked about Granblue Fantasy vs Rising on this channel, and who better to introduce this game with than its resident grappler, Ladiva. This lady is all about love and expresses it by slamming people into the ground. Intimate. Some of the standard stuff first. Ladiva has 18,000 health, tied for the highest in the game, so she's capable of taking a little more punishment than others. However, she's also not terribly nimble. Her walk speed is okay, but her run speed is slow and she's got the slowest roll speed in the game. This inferior roll frame data is completely exclusive to her, so her defense is iffy and her neutral is generally pretty honest. Yeah, but you don't care about that. Let's just get to the scoops. Jewel Resort Screwdriver, her command grab of choice. This is a move that's similar in a lot of ways to Zangief's SPD. She has 4 versions, each corresponding to the 4 attack buttons of L, M, H, and U. The L version has the most range and fastest startup speed, but the least damage. H does more damage but has less range, and M has the slowest startup speed, but does more damage than the L version and brings the opponent way closer to the corner. U SPD, we'll talk about that later. Regardless of version, her SPD does mad damage on hit, and Ladiva can easily get Oki afterward since she's left very close to the opponent. In the corner, she's basically right next to them, and plus 30 on hit at worst. So yeah, don't get grabbed by this. You will get grabbed by it though. Keep in mind the light version is also mad fast, which can make it a decent option to interrupt stagger pressure. The main gimmick with Ladiva's command grab is that she can apply a buff called Work the Crowd by holding down L or M when she lands a meterless Jewel Resort Screwdriver. Work the Crowd severely diminishes the frame advantage gained from landing Jewel Resort Screwdriver, but in exchange, it grants a damage buff of 500 to it as well as her Air 360 and anti-air command grabs. On top of that, the buff will always remain active even after landing these moves, so you only ever have to worry about needing to reapply it if you whiff her command grabs. Granblue has a system where special moves endure a cooldown after being used, and while the L and M versions of her command grabs recover super fast, the H version takes much more time, so if you want the explosive damage output of that version, keep in mind you'll have to play without access to a grounded meterless command throw for a bit in return. Ladiva's regular grab is also super strong. Instead of knocking down, it restands the opponent and leaves her plus 3 on hit and right next to them, setting up some easy strike throw mix. Ladiva has another grab with 5U, which has very slow startup to the point of being reactable and high whiff recovery. Make sure the opponent is conditioned, i.e. scared as shit, before you start tossing it out. As you'd expect, her non-grab specials are dedicated to getting her into grabbing range and enhancing her strike throw. She has a headbutt that's plus on block for the medium and heavy versions, a lariat that guard crushes, although it whiffs on opponents who are crouching, so watch out for that, and with access to 6-6L, which is a universal advancing plus on block mid and a best button nominee at the EVO Awards, she has tons of ways to steal frames and make the opponent guess on her offense. The headbutt can also destroy projectiles, and she gets a shitload of meter for doing so. This meter is well utilized in her ultimate skills, which are basically just EX moves, and her supers. Her ultimate SPD is the most damaging of the 4 versions, so if this hits you, well, you're gonna die. With the Work the Crowd buff, this baby does almost 5k and sports the same range and startup speed as the L version. Okay, that's already good, but I want to bring up the bravery point system. In Granblue Rising, you start every round with 3 of these babies. You can use them offensively for Raging Strike to extend combos, or defensively on Brave counters, which are this game's guard cancel. Once you're down to a single bravery point, you take extra damage from attacks, and that damage penalty increases when you're completely out. Being out of bravery points puts you in a dangerous position for many reasons, and this is one of them. Let's see that ultimate Jewel Resort Screwdriver damage on a no BP character. Yeah. You don't want to be reckless when spending these things. Since Ladiva is so scary when she's up close, guard cancelling against her isn't a bad investment, especially since it's -2 on block, so it's usually pretty safe and low risk, and it forces her to work her way back in. But beware, because every hit or grab she gets on you when you're out of BP will be extra devastating. It's also important to note that getting hit by supers can remove up to 2 bravery points, allowing her to manipulate the system further if she can land one of hers. And I guess I should mention that using your super will replenish one of your own bravery points. Anyway, Ultimate Lariat is also really nice as a combo and pressure tool. The first hit, which guard crushes, is followed by an unblockable second hit that causes a hard knockdown. I should mention that guard crushes in this game are very strong. After being guard crushed, depending on how plus it is, you may be able to combo off of it. Ladiva, for example, gets a full combo off the medium Lariat guard crush. You can guard cancel afterwards to escape the combo, but again, that's another bravery point you need to spend. While the meterless lariats all whiff on crouchers, ultimate lariat's first hit will actually guard crush crouching opponents, which is pretty cool. Her ultimate headbutt has frame 1 armor on startup, making it the closest thing she has to a reversal without supers. The strike version of her maximum love bomb super is also a nice way to cash out on meter, acting as a combo ender and an anti-projectile tool. She's loud, she's proud, and she plays for the crowd. You fight uphill battles for sure, but once she's in, you hurt the ones you love. And Ladiva loves everyone. Her defense isn't that great, and some of her fancier pressure reset tools are prone to getting spot dodged if the opponent can react, but all these disadvantages feel like they don't exist once you're in the corner fighting for your life against her, believe me. Might not seem that scary in a game with a super fast, super safe guard cancel, but once you're out of bravery points and can't use it anymore, good luck! Now for Iron Tager from Blazblue. With Blazblue having tons of really sick character designs and gimmicks, how did they handle the resident grappler? Much like fellow Arxis grappler Potemkin, Tager is a big fella with not much in the way of mobility. He can't air dash or forward dash, and unlike Pot, he can't even double jump, although he can super jump. However, he also has the highest health in the game at 13,000. So, alright, what's so special about this guy? And more importantly, why am I scared of him? Well, let's get into that. Tager's command grabs of choice have changed a bit between games. In the first Blazblue game, Calamity Trigger, he had one main grounded command grab, Gigantic Tager Driver, with an A and a B version. The A version was slightly slower and did less damage than the B version, but had some invul to cut through other attacks. B Tager Driver, on the other hand, did pretty bonkers damage for a command grab that, at one point, was only 6 frame startup. However, in Central Fiction, the latest Blazblue game, B Driver was removed, although the A version did pick up some of its properties, such as the startup speed. Instead, he now has Wedge Catapult as his 360B move, which is far, far slower than even the pre-Central Fiction A Tager Driver. However, it also has a bunch of invul as well. On hit, it does very low damage, but it also has a follow-up Tager can perform called Impact Driver, and Tager can also just combo off of it normally, significantly increasing the damage he scores from landing it. He also has access to an air grab, J360C, an anti-air command grab, and a command grab super, 720C, which by the way does a boatload of damage raw. As far as closing the gap, Tager has his options, but many of them are slow and unsafe, which makes them big commitments. He can use Sledgehammer to try and get in, but it's very slow. Both the A and B Sledgehammers have guard point against projectiles, and the B version has guard point against strikes, but only those with the head and body properties. Blazblue has a system where strikes are given head, body, and foot attributes, so the guard point from Tager's B Sledgehammer will not work against any attack with the foot attribute. Since most low attacks have this property, it means B Sledgehammer can be stuffed by lows on reaction due to the sluggish startup, especially against characters with low reaching lows like Kagura or S. This same speed issue applies for moves like 2D, which is plus on block, but also has a whole 26 frames of startup. He can super jump forward, but that becomes fairly predictable if it's the only way he's advancing. How are you going to get closer to the opponent to play the grappler game? Well, with Tager, you don't have to! This is Tager's drive. Like with other drives in Blazblue, it's character defining and the method behind Tager's madness. Basically, hitting the opponent with Tager's D normals as well as some of his specials will magnetize the opponent for a short period of time. This duration can be increased if you hit them with a drive attack while they're already magnetized. And these drive attacks will also magnetize on block as well, which is important, so keep that in mind. So what does this actually do? Well, while the opponent is magnetized, Iron Tager can pull that unfortunate soul towards him, allowing him to circumvent that whole pesky getting in process. The various normals and specials Tager has access to behave differently in this regard. Some attacks will only pull in grounded characters, others will only pull characters in if they're airborne, and some do both. 6A, his drive normals, 4D, 5D, and 2D, as well as all of his command grabs and his supers will be affected by the magnetism, allowing him to swiftly suck the opponent towards him. This is particularly terrifying for his command grabs, as the damage and invincibility they have is now supplemented by increased range. Magnetism also opens up new combo routes for Tager, as well as throw resets he can use to score damage off of a scared opponent. Magnetism is extremely important to Tager, so his game plan revolves around getting the opponent magnetized and then putting them in the funhouse with his strike throw. If he can't get them magnetized, well then, he's a lot weaker. Funnily enough, as scary as it is for a grappler to just be able to bring you towards him, it's arguably not even the biggest benefit of his drive. Sparkbolt, baby. This is what grappler dreams are made out of. A full screen projectile that Tager can throw out once this gauge, the electricity meter, is filled up. It'll fill up slowly on its own, and he can charge it with Voltic Charge as well. Voltic Charge will fill the meter up slightly after the initial animation completes, and you can hold it down to increase the meter gained when the animation is finished. It has guard point, but just like with B Sledge, it's only head, body, and projectile, no foot, so be smart with this and watch your toes. It's worth the trouble though. Sparkbolt is ridic. It's extremely fast and it's capable of whiff punishing like crazy, and it blows through other projectiles with ease. On top of that, it freaking wall bounces on hit, so he gets a full combo off of it. The mere presence of this projectile is enough for people to demonstrate extreme caution when playing neutral against Tager, lest they eat a Sparkbolt to the face and take a full combo and suffer the effects of magnetism. The kicker is that this baby applies magnetism on hit and block, allowing him to begin his shenanigans regardless of if it was blocked or not. This is a very important move in Tager's game plan, but since he doesn't always have immediate access to it, it's important to make the most out of every instance when you have it. Starting from Blazblue Chrono Phantasm, every character in Blazblue has access to an overdrive, which is an install that provides various effects. Tager's overdrive buffs him in a couple of ways, giving his D normals guard points, having all of his attacks that apply magnetism always apply it for the maximum duration, and greatly increasing the rate at which the electricity meter fills. Tager's weaknesses, as mentioned before, are his horrific mobility and his defense. With no meterless reversal, he relies heavily on his invincible backdash and supers to get him out of a bind. Otherwise, you're holding a lot of shit, and this is Blazblue shit, so not fun, especially when you're such a damn big target. This is a big point of strife for Tager, and he was pretty miserable in his first appearance in Calamity Trigger, not just because of his inherent flaws, but also his terrible frame data and a severe lack of ways to actually magnetize people, resulting in some laughable matchups. Later games would buff him greatly to enhance his combo game and give him new tools to supplement his game plan, like 4D, which gave him a safe way to apply magnetism at the end of block strings, and 2-2D Gadget Finger, which is an OTG throw that offers both a magnetism charge and mix-up potential since it restands on hit, although his general design as a sluggish big body character remained. In the latest Blazblue game, Central Fiction, he's usually still on the lower end of tier lists, but he's also won tournaments, so make of that what you will. And there's also a Tager video by Frankentank that you should also check out. Upon announcing my desire to make this video, a friend of mine suggested King from the Tekken series. Now, I'm as knowledgeable on Tekken as I am in biomedical engineering, and while I obviously know about King, I didn't know why he would be considered a grappler until now. Tekken is obviously much different from 2D fighting games, but the way they managed to make a command grab focused character within the scope of the series is pretty interesting to me. So, King, the man from Mexico with a jaguar mask, he looks cool as hell, and I mean, he's an actual wrestler in the lore, so it makes sense. But how exactly does this translate to being a grappler? Well, as you'd expect, King has a ton of throws at his arsenal, and more than that, he has lots of unique ways to utilize his throws. He has lots of grabs that can be used as combo enders, like the running Jaguar Bomb, as well as the unique ability to perform grabs that will hit people crouching, contrast to most regular grabs which will whiff on crouching characters entirely. And of course, he has his iconic chain grabs, where he can perform follow-up throws after landing one grab. Again, wrestler, makes sense. As far as command grabs, King sports some of the strongest in Tekken. Giant Swing, Tijuana Twister, and Tomahawk, which is often referred to as Shining Wizard by the community, are his main throws of choice. Giant Swing in particular is a god grab, and what he wants to focus on landing. It does an absolute grip of damage, especially if it hits the wall, and it's also 10 frame startup, which is super fast for a throw in Tekken. So, okay, he has lots of grabs, but how does that translate into a grab-focused mix-up game? Well, the answer to that is pretty interesting. The first thing to note in Tekken is that unlike most 2D games, a lot of command grabs in Tekken can be broken, just like regular grabs, and King is no exception. You could break Giant Swing and Shining Wizard to avoid the damage. While there are some exceptions, the general rule with throws in Tekken is that you break throws on reaction by paying attention to the character. Before I go into this, Tekken players use a number system to refer to the game's normals. I kinda hate it, but I'm sure there's people who feel the same way about numpad notation, which I happily use, so whatever, I won't judge. For Tekken, left punch is 1, right punch is 2, left kick is 3, and right kick is 4. Anyway, with Tekken, you break most grabs by hitting the corresponding arm buttons. If the opponent uses a right arm grab, you hit 1, your left punch, and you hit 2 if the opponent uses a right arm grab. For throws that use both arms, you hit 1 plus 2. Sounds simple enough, right? Now let's talk about King, because he does not give two fucks about these rules. Giant Swing flies in the face of everything I just mentioned. The thing about this move is that it has a 1 plus 2 animation where King uses both arms. So you break it by pressing 1 plus 2, yeah? Nope! Giant Swing can only be broken by pressing 1, violating everything you thought you knew about Tekken throw breaks. It might seem like you can just autopilot to 1 breaks for King, but you can't because of Shining Wizard. Shining Wizard has the same grab animation, but is broken with 1 plus 2. In situations where King can initiate a throw mix-up, you have to guess between breaking Giant Swing or breaking Shining Wizard. No reacting, it's a pure coin flip. There are certain tells for both, especially Shining Wizard as it's a running grab, but top King players can easily disguise the inputs and mitigate this issue. So yeah, King's grab game, nightmarish. As far as his strikes, he mainly wants to use his strong mids to keep the opponent from crouching, as that will allow an easy out from the Giant Swing and Shining Wizard mix-up, and he can also use his strikes for setting up throw mix-ups. Since King is so devastating up close, his movement is not exactly swift, with his backdash in particular being pretty miserable, but once he gets in, he's going to be scooping, and you're going to be guessing. King benefits a lot from the changes to grabs in Tekken 8, as they now track and beat sidesteps, combined with counter hit throws being introduced and being much harder to break, along with new versions of his throws that enhance the damage if he performs the input fast enough, greatly increasing the reward of his grabs. The sheer abundance of power crushes and parries helps too, since grabs become unbreakable if they make contact with either, ultimately making Tekken 8's King a force to be reckoned with. No ifs, ands, or buts. Considering jumping is not a prominent part of Tekken, it's pretty cool they were able to design a grappler around the vastly different systems and movement of the series, and the fact he manages to still be such a salt magnet, something I've seen plenty even though I don't play Tekken. I gotta say, I'm impressed. To cap this video off, I gotta talk SNK. If you're a command grab connoisseur, then SNK are your best friend, especially in the realm of KOF. Seriously, if you're just picking up King of Fighters 15, you've got more than your choice if you want to scoop. SNK absolutely loves giving characters command grabs, regardless of intended archetype, but as far as characters who use them to run a grappler game plan, you can take your pick. My favorite of the bunch is easily Hinako. I love this character for similar reasons to why I love Rufus from Street Fighter 4. You see this tiny little girl and you never guess that she's not only a grappler but also a fucking sumo wrestler. No flying headbutts or butt slams here, thankfully, but she does have a ton of grabs to make you feel the fear of God. One of them is frame 1 startup and has invul on that startup as well. Used as a mix-up option, it's extremely solid thanks to the speed and invincibility, and the EX version grants a combo on hit via a ground bounce. It will side switch on hit, which sucks if you have someone in the corner, but obviously it's good if the situation is reversed. She's also got another one that side switches but sacrifices the speed and invul for some serious range. My favorite though is the 623B/D command grab. Not only does it have full invul on startup and no side switching to deal with, but the corner carry is pretty nutso. Between these 3 grabs and her ability to reset her pressure with her sumo push, which is plus on block if you do the very slow D version, on top of doing pretty solid chip and guard damage, her mix is quite scary. Ironically though, I think my favorite thing about this character is not any of her grabs, but her 2-2B/D, which is a low hitting stomp that knocks down and hits from anywhere on screen as long as the opponent is grounded. Silly. She also hits like a fucking Tonka truck, so she's definitely got that going for her, although this is certainly not a Hinako only thing in KOF15. Meter dump with this character and watch the health bars burn. Then we have Shermie, who was notable for fighting with her eyes completely covered by her hair. Now that's impressive. In spite of what you might expect from a grappler, Shermie is actually quite mobile with a good run speed, good hops, and a pretty cracked JCD to complement said hops. She also has access to Axel Spin Kick, which goes through fireballs, making it a pretty solid anti-projectile tool, on top of traveling very far and being plus on block if you do the D version. Shermie Spiral is 1-frame startup and has full invul with a follow-up that adds extra damage at the cost of slightly worse frame advantage on the knockdown. She's also got an anti-air command grab and a hit grab, both of which have follow-ups she can perform after they hit. The EX follow-ups on these causes a ground bounce that allows for a juggle, which enables very high damage if you spend the cash. Shermie also has a running command grab with slower startup but good range. Used effectively, she has a very strong neutral game and she's able to score huge damage on any hit with both strike throw and her left-right mix that's enabled by the cross-up potential of her JC. If you want a comparatively more traditional grappler experience, that is to say you want to move slowly, you've got King of Dinosaurs. Dino's ground movement is a 1 out of 10, his forward walk and run speed rank among the slowest in the game, so he isn't in any condition to outrun meteors. In return, he's got high damage output and guard point on a few moves, including his main command grab. The A version is instant startup again, while the C version has guard point to call out any buttons and deliver a punish. Vice, Orochi Yashiro, you can take your pick, but I think the scariest would have to be Clark. First off, Super Argentine Backbreaker is probably my favorite command grab animation in this game. SAB's 2 versions are both very strong. The D version is instant startup with invul, and the B version has guard point and invul against throws. Genuinely, one of the most terrifying combination of properties. It'll beat mashing, throw attempts, and even reversal DPs. And he gets a combo off the EX version, which is also 1-frame startup. Complementing SAB is the Frankensteiner, which sacrifices speed for strike invul that lasts throughout the move's active frames. Between these two, Clark has ways to cover a ton of different defensive options the opponent can commit to. Like with Shermie, he has follow-ups he can perform if the command grabs hit, and with these follow-ups, he can score extremely good Oki even mid-screen, allowing him to safe jump reversals or go for another strike throw mix. And once you've guessed wrong, he nets dummy damage. He also has really good buttons for neutral and a command hop called Step that travels very far and has lower body invul, which lets him get in quite efficiently. I also have to shout out Goro Daimon. He's not in 15, but he's another KOF grappler and is notably quite strong in KOF 94. See, the thing about these characters is that they're not exempt from KOF's movement options. They can still run and super jump and hyper hop, so KOF grapplers are for the most part just as mobile as the other characters on the roster. They're not sacrificing mobility and movement for the strength of their mix-ups once they finally get in, they have the same movement everyone else does. There are some exceptions like with Dinosaur, who as I mentioned has horrendous ground movement, but Clark, Shermie, Orochi Yashiro, they can move, and while some other characters may be faster, that doesn't mean they can't get in and start cleaning house. Some might say that most KOF grapplers fall into the category of pseudo-grappler or hybrid grappler because of this, but whatever the case, it's still cool that grappler mains have one developer who doesn't hate the characters they like to play. The rest of us are terrified though. With all that said, I think it's about time to address the title of this video. Why do I, the person talking to you, believe grapplers are the scariest characters to fight? I should mention again that this is a fully subjective topic. Some people don't mind fighting grapplers, and I'm sure there are some absolute gamblers who actually enjoy going up against him. Personally, I void my bowels every time I queue up against a Zangief in SF6 or Waldstein in Uni 2, and I'm seemingly destined to play characters with bad matchups against grapplers, and while it took me a bit to really understand why I feel that way, I feel like I can put it into words pretty good here. First of all, let me raise something I've observed over the past couple of months that I've seen other people agreeing with. Getting thrown sucks. People in the 90s were getting into fights over this shit, and honestly, sometimes I can understand why. Taking a normal grab that does 10% damage is one thing, but an untechable grab that deals 30% of your life, that transcends annoyance and becomes downright petrifying. To me, blocking is like the ultimate safe space in fighting games. Down backing is what you want to do when you're scared and just want to reassess the situation, especially if you've managed to make it back to neutral, but you can't block for too long against grapplers, otherwise you just get scooped. Oftentimes, you have to change large facets of your game plan, offensively and defensively, when faced with a grappler, and it's worth mentioning that these characters are often very gimmicky, which means you're at the mercy of potential knowledge checks too. Grappler offense is something I fear. I mean, anyone should be scared of having to guess and being punished with large damage and a scary Oki situation for guessing wrong, but it's not just when they're pressuring you. I think the fact most grapplers have high health is also something that makes them unnerving to fight. Being forced to win rounds in more interactions than normal is very annoying, but it's important to mention that for grapplers, that extra health can be important in their game plan, giving them more chances to make comebacks and also build meter, since most games have characters receive meter when they're hit, and grapplers can naturally take more hits. A lot of the time it just feels like you're fighting against a giant, unmovable fortress that's also a literal ticking time bomb. While grapplers tend to have bad defense in general, they usually have reversals that make up for their meter cost or general risk with great reward, mostly in the form of damage, like SF6 Gief's level 3 or Tager's 720C. If you've ever played against SF6 Gief, you know how terrifying this can be. Even on your own offense, it feels like you're guessing for your own life. The big thing that seals the deal for me is that grapplers are built around punishing you dearly for the kind of mistakes they want to force you to make. You're forced to make decisions, but the wrong decision just gets you killed, sometimes so fast that you can't even process what happened, and that's why grapplers are my pick for the scariest archetype. As someone who is prone to panicking or just getting mentally overwhelmed, it's easy to fall to these kinds of characters and just get destroyed for doing something stupid. There are a lot of characters where you kinda just have to accept that they're going to get in and you'll have to deal with their offense, but with grapplers, your game plan is often to make sure they stay as far away from you as possible, which says a lot to me. Again, this is purely subjective. Depending on what character you play in what game, having to fight a grappler might make you feel giddy, especially if you play zoners. And even without that, some people just like the thrill of guessing. That said, it's not very hard to observe how the grappler archetype is hated by people who compete, even when the grappler in their game is bad. Something I find funny is that almost every character I've talked about, Zangief, Iron Tager, Potemkin, Ladiva, they've had more than their fair share of low-tier appearances. Even Strive Potemkin may be one of the most detested modern FG characters I've ever seen this past year. There were versions of the game where he wasn't considered that strong, and even then, people hate fighting this kind of character enough that it almost doesn't matter that they're bad, because of how their game plans can end games so quickly and often off of just one bad decision if things go right for them, even if you played the matchup perfectly up to that point. And God forbid a grappler is ever buffed to be genuinely strong, let alone top tier. It's practically all you'll ever hear in regards to that game. Twitter discourse is born from this shit. In spite of how much people actually hate fighting grapplers, I've always observed that they tend to be quite popular when it comes to spectating, even amongst people who actually compete. I've seen rooms of very strong Strive players cheering for current Potemkin, and I think the reason why is because even when a grappler is obnoxiously strong, most of the time, their biggest problem still comes down to actually getting in. In my opinion, the prospect of a character who needs to struggle to get to the range where they work is just very exciting to watch when separated from how stressful actually fighting them is. Seeing them win games in just a couple of reads is also really cool, and it also helps that most of the time, grapplers struggle against zoners, and people don't like zoners, especially casuals. The zoner wins the matchup, it's expected so no one really cares. The grappler wins the matchup, it's an upset and people get hyped. I'll admit, even though I hate fighting grapplers, watching them can be very exciting. It also probably helps that the characters themselves tend to be very popular. I always love how loyal grappler mains are. Most of the time, from what I've seen, if someone plays a grappler in one game, then they play a grappler in every other game. I personally know a few people like that, and it's very funny to me. With all that said, as much as I've talked about disliking fighting grapplers, I'm honestly glad the archetype exists. I appreciate they can bring variety to a game's roster and to matches, especially in a lot of modern games, and they're just exciting to watch. Every grappler is an underdog at some point, and rooting for an underdog is fun. With that said, I'm curious what you all think. I'm sure there's a grappler I didn't mention here, but I just stuck to the ones I have experience with for the most part. So who's your favorite grappler? And more importantly, do you actually enjoy fighting against grapplers? Make sure to let me know. Before I leave, I'd like to thank the many people who helped out on this script for the video. Major thanks go to HomeDepotemkin, Ubercheesecake, Jackie Sparkles, MoustachedVillain, theJAKEMAN, and Tanasinn. I'd also like to express a personal thanks to my buds 8FootOctopus and Mundo, who are also big helps. Anyway, thank you for watching, have a great night, and take care. Hey everyone, member shoutout time. I'd like to apologize for the long gap in videos. I've been having my ass absolutely beat by a combination of traveling and moving houses, so it's been tough finding the time to actually work on this video. And on top of that, it was just a long endeavor. I mean, you can see the length of the video. This did not take, this was not an easy task to make it, but I'm glad, I think it came out pretty well, and I'm overall happy with how things turned out. Anyway, I think it's about time to thank all my channel members, so thank you to Old Man Han, Cammy the Killer, Jazba, Mortis, Arg Seals, Wormy, Terry Hints, Perfect Orange, Pet Shop from Fortnite, Happy the Hap Hap, HPHK, Gundog92, Gerald Say, Loose Chujin, Raymond ZX200, Nick Toyo, Sonic Frontiers is a good game, Basewire, Power Levelation, Isaac the Collector, and Kira the Stowaway. Thank you all so much for the support. It means the world to me. Again, I'm very sorry for the gap in uploads, and also sorry for not uploading anything last month. That was my bad. I actually only started working on it. It may seem like I took a month off. I really didn't. I started working on this video right after I got home from CEO. I originally wanted to get a video out before CEO, but I couldn't come up with anything. That's why I made those 2 YouTube shorts that I just released. I don't usually do shorts, but I did those just to fill the gaps. But again, it may seem like I've been taking a fucking break, but I'm not. As soon as I got home from CEO, I hit the ground running and I started working on this video. So let that be an indicator of how big of a task and endeavor this video was. Anyway, again, thank you all Thank you all for the support. It means the world to me. I love you all. Thank you. Have a great night. Thanks for watching.